Airing first on Asheville FM, WSFM-LP 103.3 in Asheville, North Carolina, this is The Final Straw, a weekly anarchist and anti-authoritarian broadcast and podcast emanating out of occupied Tsalagi land in southern Appalachia. We bring you voices from struggles for liberation from all around the world. Welcome. This week we're featuring two guests speaking about Russia. First up, John spoke with author and journalist Dmitry Okrest about the state of anarchist and anti-fascist movements in Russia, the politics of Putin's United Russia Party, Nazis and the far right in that country, and successes of the Communist Party in electoral politics recently. Then, Moscow Anarchist Black Cross member-in-exile Antii Rautiainen adds some more detail on repression in Russia, including the hunger strike of network case prisoner Viktor Filinkov, calls for solidarity with mathematician Azat Miftakhov, and others. You can find a ton of links in our show notes and at our website if you want to dig deeper, and also links to our past conversations about repression and resistance in Russia. And you can find a transcript of this conversation in the near future on the Zine tab on our website. In a brief note, we want to share that the SF Bayview National Black newspaper editor Nube Brown just published an article showing that Keith Washington, aka Comrade Malik, admitted in a letter to a prosecutor in 2011, while simultaneously throwing a prisoner seeking legal support to the wolves, that he had and gladly would work with law enforcement and the FBI to snitch on inmates or whoever as a source or informant. Malik was then incarcerated in Texas and became involved in organizing with the new Afrikan Black Panther Party and from which he is now alienated, and participated in the 2016 nationwide prison strikes, gaining notoriety. Malik came to play a prominent role in the prison movement and was in 2020 released to a halfway house in San Francisco after surprisingly fast parole from Texas and a brief stint in federal prison. Malik also helped to run SF Bayview for a short while upon release, but has since left. I think a lot of facts on this need clarification still, but some things just don't add up with Malik's situation. You can check out the piece by Nube Brown with an addendum by former editor Mary Ratcliff at sfbayview.com, and likely the print edition of the paper.
Hello and welcome to The Final Straw. My name is John, and I'm going to be conducting an interview today with Russian independent journalist Dmitry Okrest about recent repression of leftists and anti-fascists in Russia. Welcome to the show, Dmitry.
Yeah, nice to meet you. Hello.
Nice to meet you. To start off with, could you give our listeners some context on yourself and the work you've done as an independent journalist in Russia?
Okay, just a few words. I have been a member of punk rock scene in Moscow for last 15 years. I was much more activity 10 years ago, and I helped make fanzine, free markets, music label, book publishing house, and discussion forums. There was when a generation change. I tried to work at first in a historical book publishing house, and then I moved to work in the media. And as a journalist, I worked for a long time in the society department. So I write more about street politics, human rights, police, prisons. And I have also write a lot of political radicals, including Nazis, jihadists. And now I'm a co-author of two books about how the Soviet Union and the Eastern Bloc moved from their version of socialism to capitalism.
Oh.
And yeah, there are books like In Spirit of the People's History of the US by Howard Zinn. And I'm also the author of a book about Rojava, where different researchers, activists, fighters talk about this project and about their own experience. And now I'm currently preparing a book about anti-fascist movement in Russia. And now we're looking for opportunity to translate some of it in English. Yes, just information about me.
Oh yeah, no, that's great. Those books all sound really fascinating, but you said they're only in Russian currently?
Yeah, unfortunately only in Russian, but we wanted to prepare it to English also, English language.
That's really interesting. I was like, all three of those sound fascinating. And Just for context, as far as, because, most of the listeners live in the United States and we're sort of ignorant about the world in general, or at least many of us are. Around how old are you, and what, with your age, where does that place you as far as, like, this is just my own personal interest question, but as far as, like, your experience with the Soviet Union and the years in between, and I guess do you recall that experience of like the Yeltsin years and all this sort of?
I was a child when the Soviet Union cancelled, so I really didn't remember anything, but I remember a lot of details after Soviet Union crashed. So it was a time of economical crisis. Mostly people, they didn't have any money at all, no job, and there was a lot of local wars. But on the other hand, there were much more freedom of speech, freedom in politics, and there was no big punishment for any street activity. So now it's nostalgia war about what was it. So was it like good time or not very good time? And now there are much more political wars in this period. Mostly people, they have very selective memory for it. Mm-hmm. So now it's very political question.
Interesting. When you're saying more like freedom of expression, you're saying as in contrast to today, right?
Yep. Yeah. Because Putin now, he's a president for last 22 years. He became prime minister in 99. So we have like 9 years or like so-called freedom, and now we have 21 years period for so-called stability. But in fact, there is no stability at all. It's just like a mask, like imagination. Just
the question I wanted to sort of start off with, or I guess the second question is, could you, as best your ability, give us a sort of brief overview of recent anarchist and anti-fascist movements in Russia and like the repression that has been facing them? Because I'm sort of aware of a bunch of trials in the last 10 years or so of supposed like anarchist terrorists or whatever.
Well, maybe the most well-known case is so-called network terroristical community. It started 4 years ago before World Cup championship. So activists were kidnapped, beaten, electrocuted, forced to sign and learn investigation evidence. There are 11 men from different cities, and Secret Service incriminate participation in this mythical terroristic organization. So there were a lot of episodes like they are really terrorists, but nothing, no evidence. In this case, political police made a lot of work. So a lot of people moved from Russia because they was in a dangerous situation. And well, it's like the most the story. But in fact, there are a lot of another so-called terroristic cases. Like 3 years ago, the 70-year-old anarchist, he went in the local political police office, and he was like with a bomb, but he killed only himself. And he said that he tried to support this network case. And after it, maybe more than 200 people, they were arrested, or there were a lot of cases against them. They said that it was very good. He is like a hero that he do it. Some of these persons are anarchists or anti-fascist. So it was like against anarchist movement. And also there are people in Kaliningrad, in Crimea, like ex-part of Ukraine. So they also judgment by terroristic case. So now terroristic case, it's like the best way to put anybody in prison because no one really want to support terrorists because, it sounds that, he want to kill everyone. But now people like year by year they understand that it's more like a not really a terrorist attack. It's something like just anything which political police said. So
I see. I mean, I know that there is a sort of like big-ish or was movement of like anti-fascism in Russia, and in my mind that was a response, I assume, to a rise of hard right violence on the streets and politically. But like, I guess it's hard to say a brief history of that because that's the last, I assume, many years. But I think in my mind, the reason I could assume that the far right gained power in Russia in the last, or not power, but like somewhat popularity.
Not unfortunately not now, but like 10 years ago, maybe I think hundreds of migrants and 10 street anti-fascists they were killed
Jeez,
in 0
hundreds?
years. Yeah,
Oh my god.
yeah. So, but when the Nazis tried to seize the monopoly of power and begin pretending to become, the power themselves, all violence was stopped pretty quickly. There were quite a lot of information and provocateurs in the Nazi movement.
Okay.
Now there are a lot of Nazis in Russian prisons, and they wanted to do something, like Aryan Brotherhood, but most of them they just cooperate with prison administrative in exchange for any help, any indulgence. And on the other hand, there are a lot of right-wing football fans, and they become demonstratively apolitical last year in exchange for opportunities to be master on their territories.
Okay.
So some of them attack political opposition actions, and now they try to be very silent, especially before and during World Championship in Russia 3 years ago. Yeah. So now it's not very really big problem, but for last summer and last fall, political police they arrested 3 groups of neo-Nazis. So it looks that it became more and more popular, but the memory of those events, I think it pops up among the younger generation, but the intensity of passion, it's not the same at all. So police forced them, these Nazis, to admit on cameras that they like renounced Nazism, but I think they were just not terrorists. They was, just make different street violence, but nothing more. But they will be in prison, I think, for next 10 years and maybe something like it. So in my mind, now we accept a consistent evolution of the right in the People's Gate, the open misanthropy, and neo-Nazis hope for desperate revenge, and therefore they cannot meet murders and terroristic attack. But I think they will individually be crushed by the state and police.
I know that this conversation sort of sprawling, but that brought up an interesting point for me, which is that I think I personally at least don't really understand what Putin's and the state of Russia, like the, United Russia's politics are. I think a lot of American kind of liberals see them as being maybe like right wing, but in my mind it seems like they just sort of will work with whomever against whomever, or like it's I guess I don't really understand what the like United Russia politics are other than just like power.
I think that nobody knows, in fact, because It's something quite conservatism, but inside Russia, the state just use different political science and young politicians for themselves. Like when they need, they use Nazis, and that's all. So, but in this case, they're not a Nazi state. They just use it like for several years, and that's all. For example, they tried to make communication with left wing movement like 10 years ago, but nobody want to do it, and they say okay, but they try to do it. So now they said a lot of things, a lot of against tolerance in about transgender and etc. And it looks that it's much more like right wing, but in fact in next 5 years they can change it again. So
it's just sort of
yeah.
cold power or something like that.
Yep.
Interesting. I guess speaking of sort of politics, more macro politics in Russia, we saw really large protests in the last year, in theory in support of the opposition political figure Navalny. And the United States media and liberals sort of like championed him as a sort of like, liberal democratic icon, but some of what I've read is that he's somehow like kind of more of a Russian nationalist, or has like sort of sketchy racial beliefs of other groups in the Russian Federation. I guess I'm curious about the way in which like leftists and specifically anarchists engaged in those protests, and also what your take of Navalny as a political figure are. And I can restate those two different questions.
You see, as I said before, Russian government don't use any political terms, and usually people in Russia, they also don't use any political terms. So mostly people, they really don't know what's the difference between, a liberal, democratic, authoritarian, and etc. So it's in this case, when you said like about liberal, Western, and etc., usually people don't understand what does it mean. Yeah, Navalny originally he was known like a blogger who writes about corruption. He is native of the Democratic Liberal Party, but he tried to cooperate with nationalists. Yeah, it's true. He tried to communicate with them when they were popular 10 years ago. But Nazi and nationalists, they didn't accept him. So as a result, now Navalny tried not to answer about this question. He tried to, ignore it. And for a long time, he was out of danger. Also, he had several criminal cases. Then he was poisoned in last year. He was taken to Berlin. Then he returned. Out of prison was waiting for him. And now he's in prison. His arrival was a strong sign that inspires many people, not only his supporters. And Navalny actions looks more like a civil protest in which anarchists they also took part, and two of them ended up in prison. One of guy is still in prison. There was a case with policemen. The current protests they connected with the name of Navalny. Now he's been recognized by extremist organization, and nobody can say that he supported Navalny with any punishment. But what else? There were mass actions against Putin Navalny to the prison. But after the most massive repression begins in this January, and now most of subordinates of Navalny's headquarters, they are in immigration. Many media now they're in crisis. These media outlets and are under sanctions, and a lot of people now they're in prison because it's very easy to to be in prison after 1, 2, 3 times in a legal demonstration. And now we don't have any legal demonstration because the situation of coronavirus, and it's illegal to make any demonstration at all. Another thing is that economical conditions have been deteriorated in Russia lately, and Navalny has making it visible how officials are living richer and richer. So people really angry in this case because they don't have a lot of money, but they see video with officials and with the palaces. So for me, okay, I think it's a good position when we can see the result of such corruption. But as I said before, mostly people, they don't use any political terms, so they don't have any political education. And in this case, they took that is the main problem. They don't know what to be after, and there is no any opportunity to understand what will be after.
So there are recent elections in Russia, and I know that something that came out of them was also this law against foreign agents or something like this.
Yep, unfortunately. Yeah.
And I know that that has led to repression of journalists and other, I assume, all sorts of people, but specifically leftists. And I was wondering if you could speak about, I guess, the most recent wave of repression, as well as stories that I've read about people leaving Russia for the nation of Georgia or other areas, like having to flee, basically, based on the repression.
Oh, yeah, it's true. And since the beginning of 221, the Ministry of Justice has added 11 media outlets, 42 journalists, and 9 NGOs to the register of so-called foreign agents. So every Friday, someone else gets into this list. And now there are 223 foreign agents. And okay, if we think in terms of liberal democracy, then it's like, act of state pressure on the media, on public organization, because there is destruction of any infrastructure uncontrolled by authorities. So we're talking about project uncontrolled by the Russian authorities. So in this case, this organization, usually they take grants from different funds, from US, from United Nations, and from the European Union. But the problem is that only this organization, only these NGOs, and only this media try to do anything with corruption, with protests, or with tortures in the police office. Well, so the danger of criminal liability constantly hangs over foreign agents. So from fines to imprisonment up to 5 years. And the swift violence of the rule learned to really big fines and bankruptcy of organization. So you can go to prison for 5 years if you don't do a good paperwork for ministry, but no one's know how to work it. And society understand it. People sign a lot of petition against this foreign agent law. So now it's 150,000 words. But as usual, there is no any strict actions because people are afraid. And as I said before, detention really can lead you to prison. So people try not to be in this area.
I wanted to kind of ask the question of, have there been...
Sorry. About Georgia, Georgia.
Specifically, I had seen an article about specifically Russians fleeing to Georgia, and I imagine it's because Georgia's aligned with the United States, sort of.
Russia and Georgia, there was war between them 12 years ago. So we don't have any diplomatic contacts. There are a lot of American NGOs are based in Georgia. 20% of Georgia territory is under control of the Russian army. Yeah, and in this case, this country is relatively safe. Like, sorry for such a comparison, but it looks like American activists would go to Cuba, for example. But basically, everyone connected with politics is going now to Georgia, like journalists, human rights activists, supporters of Navalny, liberal activists, leftists, anarchists. So it's because in a case of coronavirus, there are not a lot of states where we can go. So there, it's border is closed. So we can go to Armenia, and then from Armenia, which is friend of Russia, we can go to Georgia. But mostly states now they're closed for Russians. So in this case, Georgia became like a state where it can be maybe safe, maybe not. I don't know exactly.
I see. Sort of along the lines of talking about Georgia and then also right-wing violence that we were talking about earlier, I was wanting to ask you about sort of if there has been a lot of repression of queer and trans activism and just life in Russia, or how that has been. Because you mentioned that anti-trans stuff had been popping up, I guess.
It looks like no people, no problem. So now a lot of such people, they're invisible because there are a lot of law against so-called gay propaganda. So mostly people, they prefer not to say about themselves. For example, mostly gay people who I know, I really don't know if they're gay or not because there is no any coming out, and usually they just sometimes I hear about someone, but usually people prefer not to say anything about it. So mostly people prefer to be normal, because if you say that you are gay, it will be not very good situation in prison during arrest, and there are a lot of xenophobic. So mostly people, including gays and trans person, they prefer to not to show themselves in any cases, especially in demonstration and etc. So there is no any open street manifestations or something like it, and mostly people to show their orientation only in talks at home, something like it.
Damn.
And in Georgia, the same situation. In Georgia and in Belarus, in Ukraine, the situation a little bit better, but in fact, there are a lot of Nazis also. So mostly people prefer not to show themselves during ordinary life.
That's pretty grim. Speaking of Belarus, maybe a week or two ago on The Final Straw, we aired an interview with several Belarusian anarchists about the uprising and repression by Lukashenko regime there. And I guess I was wondering, because in our me and you talks, we discussed Belarus and Belarusian anarchists quite a bit, and I was wondering, to what extent is there without making this a conspiracy, but how much like interaction and solidarity is there amongst anarchists in former Soviet Eastern European countries? Because I know that there's been a really strong anarchist movement in Belarus for as long as I've been reading about, that Abolishing Borders from Below magazine about Eastern Europeans. So I was wondering, what sort of influences and whatever go between these countries.
Yeah, Belarus is the closest country to Russians in linguistic and cultural terms. It's like I never been in Canada and US, but it looks like the same. So before of the start of the war in Donbass, Ukraine was the same country, but now xenophobic, unfortunately, is on both sides. So there were many common organizations in a post-Soviet space, and activists always went to each other during demonstration or forums, and a lot of people from Russia, they helped local activists. For example, many of my friends now they're banned from entering territory of Belarus for next 10 years. The reason because they took participation in actions, street actions, and now activists left for Russia when repressions began in Belarus because neighboring Poland didn't open any humanitarian escapes now. But in another case, territory of Russia is not very safe for Belarusian people. For example, one Belarusian journalist was detained from Moscow to Belarus, and now he's in prison. And now there is one anarchist from Belarus. Now he's in jail. He took part in so-called mass riots in Belarus, and Belarus state wants to move him home, but he's still in Moscow. Well, right now over 1,000 people are in a prison for political prisons in Belarus, and about 30 anarchists and anti-fascists are also in prison. So they're tortured by suffocation, electricity, some of them, because we don't have any good quality communication with them, because it's a big problem with advocacy now. It's bad for them to tell anything from prison. So, and I think that same situation will be in Russia in next maybe 2-3 years, because usually Belarus looks like like a training camp when state try to do something and to understand is it work or not. A lot of people think that now we have the similar situation in Moscow or in St. Petersburg, maybe.
Oh wow!
Unfortunately. Yes, it's like one of the fear.
Yeah. Has that in the past happened where like forms of repression, but like have authoritarian government policies happened in Belarus and then later happened in Russia in the past, or is that just kind of a fear?
Okay, the most true information you can read in a site abcbelarus.org. It's the site of Anarchist Black Cross Minsk. But what I see now, mostly people, they don't do any street action, but they're still angry and they still don't love the state, and they tried to help people in prison. They tried to support each other. There was a lot of solidarity between people. They help each other in medical cases, in cases of mental health. So, in my opinion, it's the best option for people now to help each other and try to support each other in this very dangerous time. So the best time is to save the resources.
Okay. Thank you for that. I mean, it's just a horrible situation, but also, well, this isn't really related to the anarchist movement or anarchy at all. You sent me an interesting article in Jacobin about the recent elections and electoral gains by the Communist Party. And also about how and the article was posing that there was sort of a shift within that party towards a more like social democratic opposition sort of. And I guess I was just curious about if that in itself could lead to like a resurgence in leftist politics in general, and also if the recent gains in the election are if that's significant or if it's just kind of a weird aberration.
Well, there is a very interesting case of Mikhail Lobanov. He's professor, he's mathematic. He take part in a trade union. He's a real good activist, and he's not like a typical communist from this party, but in fact this communist party is not like a real communistic party. It's not like a Marxist party, etc. It's more conservative. They more think about how Soviet Union was a really great state, and for them, it's more important to know that Soviet Union was imperial than it was any communist state. So the campaign of Lobanov, this professor, I think that it was the best thing that left activist has been doing for a long time in the entire post-Soviet space, because the degree of penetration of leftist ideas, slogans, problems into masses was underrepresented. I think it was people really were surprised that there is something who could say anything smart about society without any problem. And he, not to say that he is communist or he is socialist. In fact, he looks, maybe like a left-wing Democrat, something like it. But for a lot of people, it was really surprised because they usually see communists very people who are more Stalinist than communist. So in Lobanov, they see just very smart person who can said smart think about society, about taxes, about different repressions, and with left-wing optic. And in this case, it was really interesting to see the reaction of people. So he won election, but in fact now he's not a deputy in the parliament because the election was the state prefer just to change a result, and now he's not deputy. And in this case, it was interesting how he made a political machine. So there were a lot of left-wing activists who decided to help him. So he preferred not to. He preferred to be, like a mouthpiece of a lot of people. He preferred to be not like a typical parliamentary, but a man who take recommendation from people to the state. And for political system in Russia now, it looks really exotic. So maybe for people in US, it's maybe looks like nothing special, but for Russian political movement, it was wow how it works, and they were really surprised, and that's why a lot of people help him.
Do you think in some ways that this is a sign, like his popularity or the popularity of the things he was saying show that there is some kind of like a left wing or like more liberatory desire in Russian society, I guess? And like also, do you think it's that he's actually speaking to material needs, or like the I just don't really understand. I don't know, but yeah, I guess yeah. Do you think there is a left potential in Russia, I guess?
I think that it shows the request for left-wing ideas, because people see the crisis, economical crisis, political crisis, ecological crisis, electoral crisis, but people, they don't see any solution. So there is no way to protest. A lot of people went to this election because they just wanted to show they not agree with the state and they want something to change, but they are really fear to do anything. They really fear to take part in any street action, to take part in any organization, because a lot of organization now under the punishment, under the repressions. So I think that it could be a good chance to show that there are such ideas that they can be popular, but no one know how to use it in fact.
Yeah. Have there been any sort of attempts from more autonomous or anti-authoritarian left groups to sort of, not piggyback, but like exploit the fact that these ideas are becoming more mainstream, or like work on spreading those or something, or
Mm, how to say. In fact, we don't have any polling to understand what people really think, and we don't have time to grow the political or to grow any activist, because it's a really big risk for such people. So only at the kitchen people say what they really think. And in this case, we have a lot of informal network between people, but there is no really formal actions and formal organization for any movement. And mostly people, they prefer to put their ideas, their activity in a secret.
Does it feel like when there are the large-scale demonstrations, that's the only moment when people can be open politically? Like, when there's enough people in the streets that it's hard for the police to pick off individuals, I guess? I don't know if that makes any sense.
I think that really nobody knows the answer for this question, because there is no any data, there is no any information, and it's really hard to make any researchers. And now the state tried to do something with independent researchers, with independent education, with people who know how to make any investigation. And in this case, we don't have any instruments to understand what we can do and what can we do in next year, in next 5 years. There is a very good term how to describe this. Yeah, so it's like forced helplessness. People don't know about their power, and there is no opportunity to check it. And the same situation for left-wing movement and for anarchist movement, because they don't know which power they have and how they can use it, because there is no any space for practice.
I assume you probably didn't listen to it, but in the interview my colleague did with the folks from Belarus about the uprising there, it was interesting because, well, so many of their comrades are in prison and facing really kind of horrible odds. They also seem somewhat more positive about potential future stuff in Belarus, and that like, I don't know, it's just interesting. I guess it takes me by sort of surprise, the sort of attitudes of those folks being more, I guess, hopeful about the future, whereas it seems like in Russia it's not so hopeful at the moment, which is just reality, obviously. But it was interesting to hear the differences. Obviously, very different countries and different contexts, but
I can't say that I'm optimist, because I think I'm more realist. And in fact, I really don't know. I really don't think that it will be better after Putin, because I really fear that different police departments, Nazis, and etc. can use their power. But on another hand, I see people around me. I see a lot of good vibes between people. And in this case, I hope that it will be better, because people can say something without any pressure. But it's just hypothesis, so I really don't know.
I wanted to first thank you and really appreciate you being in touch with me and doing this. But I also wanted to ask, is there a way that you could think of that anarchists in the United States or anti-fascists could show solidarity with their comrades in Russia that are facing repression right now, or any kind of meaningful solidarity, I guess?
There is Moscow Anarchist Black Cross. It supported repression, and as maybe you know, Russian and Belarusian anarchists often call for solidarity. So the best way is to make any demonstration or help. So you can check like autonom.org or repression.com for any information in English, because these organizations, they used to support by legal and material support, medical care, food parcels, and etc. And I know that Russian state really don't like to see any solidarity in different states. So when they see solidarity action in another states, they are really angry. And for us, it was really interesting to see how American anti-fascists and anarchists took part in different demonstrations last year, 2 years ago, and it was really exciting for us. But my recommendation that everyone really need to know how to support each other, like to know how to take medical care, how to make good mental health, and how to be in a good, healthy condition. Because when we have this street violence 10 years ago, only training with guns, with knife, help people from anarchist movement to survive. So in my mind, it's a really good knowledge how to protect yourself, and I hope that people from US also know how to help themselves to protect each other.
You're like, you need to do mental health stuff, also learn how to shoot guns. It's just, I didn't expect it to go there, but it makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I really appreciate you talking with us. And I wanted to know, where can people find work that you've written and stuff that are translated into English?
Written in English. Like, if you know, I have some publication in a site Open Democracy. It's a site where there's a lot of situation in Russia and Belarus and Ukraine in English. And also we made English language podcast about Russian prisons, and we called it Russian Limbo. So if you wanna, you can listen it. And yes, that's all. Usually we don't have any big possibility to make any articles in foreign languages, unfortunately.
Well, no, that's great. And we'll list these, the different websites you've mentioned and the podcast in the show notes so people can click on those. And that podcast about the Russian prison sounds fascinating. But yeah, so yep. I appreciate it, and thank you for, negotiating the time difference with me.
Yeah, thanks a lot, and thanks for your answer and for your interest. It was really nice to talk with you.
The Final Straw Radio is a proud member of the Channel Zero network of anarchist podcasts, and here's a jingle from another member of CZN.
Are you tired of listening to Western experts talking how the world works?
Isn't it a portion of liberal analysis of the uprising makes you fall asleep?
Well, then check Elephant in the Room, an anarchist radio show from European Dresden, where we interview activists who are participating in struggles around the world.
Elephant in the Room is a proud member of Channel Zero Network. You can find our show on your favorite podcast platforms, CZN website, or somewhere on the internet.
From activists
for activists.
Can you identify yourself for the audience with any names, pronouns, or affiliations that make sense for this conversation?
Yeah, so my name is Antii. I'm working with the ABC Moscow. Even though I'm in exile currently, haven't been able to visit Russia for the almost 9 years. And he is fine for pronoun.
So I was hoping that a chat with you could accompany the interview that we just heard with Dmitry Okrest about the situation for anarchists and anti-fascists in Russia by making space for more specific updates from Moscow ABC. So thank you so much for making yourself available for this. Off mic, you had mentioned that there was a hunger strike of Viktor Filinkov. Could you tell us more about his situation, remind us of his case, and how he's doing?
Yeah, so Viktor Filinkov is was imprisoned as a part of this so-called network case, which was started around 2017 and 18. It was number of anarchists and antifascists and just a random friends from city of Penza and city of St. Petersburg, who were kind of framed up to be some underground terrorist organization. And there was a quite wide support campaign for them, and which united many different people all around Russia and also internationally. But it didn't succeeded to have this case collapse, and everyone was sentenced. And Viktor Filinkov was one of the people sentenced, and they have now been their sentences during this year and the previous year. They have been appealed without any changes, and now they have been sent to prison colonies. And Viktor Filinkov arrived to his colony in August. It's in Orenburg, close to Kazakhstan, and they have been putting huge pressure on him on this colony. He's been basically sent to hole more than 10 times. He hasn't been a single day, I think, in the general prison population. Maybe he was in some common cells for a couple of days, but in general he's been kept in complete isolation. And currently he started a hunger strike 30th of October. This is traditional day of political prisoners, of first Soviet dissidents and then political prisoners in the Russian Federation since the 70s. And then there were hunger strikes of political prisoners already in the 70s. So Viktor joined this tradition, but also he's moving now his own demands, which are that he wants to be released to general prison population to escape the isolation, and he also demands to get written materials like books, papers, and materials of his own case, because currently he's not even let to read his own case. So this is an ongoing thing, and Viktor is struggling for some basic things, and probably it's the prison administration. Basically, he wants to frame up this. Every time he's sent to hole, it's from some very minor violation, like laying down in his bed, which basically is not allowed in the Russian prison colonies in certain hours, and or not dressing completely as according to prison form rules or something like this, like just general bullshit things. And probably the goal is to railroad him to higher security prison, which is called this EPKT, which is basically the most highest security prisons.
A hunger strike is a really intense method of struggle that can cause, extreme deterioration of some of the body's systems, long-lasting effects after the actual hunger strike. It's a choice of last tactic, sort of, for people. Is there much history recently of prison administrations responding to this, or is there much discussion in Russia right now about Viktor's case?
Filikov's case doesn't seem to be like super high profile, but there is also, it's not only on the anarchists, but also some more like human rights liberals are supporting to some extent, especially the Novaya Gazeta, which got the Nobel Prize of Literature. They are covering his struggle, so I wouldn't say that he's completely isolated, but also these demands are super moderate. Like he's not demanding like Putin to give up power or something. So I think there are certain chances of him. It was quite prolific hunger strike was in around 2018 and 19. The Oleg Sentsov is one of the Crimean prisoners, together with Alexander Kolchenko. Like Oleg Sentsov and Kolchenko, they were accused of organizing these underground activities against the Russian occupation of Crimea and Sentsov himself was not anarchist, but his co-defendant Kolchenko was. And Sentsov was in some very long hunger strikes, and eventually he was released as part of the prisoner exchange. Of course, not only because of the hunger strikes, but I think the hunger strikes may have played some role that he was included in the prisoner exchange, which was originally meant to be just like prisoners of war. So I think like occasionally like hunger strikes are pretty popular in Russia, even with some labor struggles. And environmental maybe even too popular if you ask me, but I wouldn't say that they are completely useless. Like they also can achieve some results. So it's of course a complicated thing. Like sometimes might be that the risks to health and so on are much, but also sometimes you don't have so many other options. So I hope Filinkov's strike will succeed.
Yeah, me too. Are there ways for people outside of Russia to support his case?
Yeah, so I was asked about this for people who are more closely involved in supporting the Filinkov. As our group, the ABC Moscow, we have been diminishing during the years, and many people are actually like half of our group has been forced to migrate for different reasons, as I was deported and others have become refugees. There are still people in Russia to involved, but we are not in this particular case super much active. But there are people for example, in the repression campaign for the network prisoners, and they are currently organizing letter writing. But they have only resources to organize this in Russian. And of course, you have to send the letters in Russian. But I think in the show, we can share the link. There are links to online forms in Russian, and there is a petition text. So with Google Translate, people who might made a contribution, they can try to join this campaign. But also, as usually, just in general information coverage would be needed, and letter writing in our site of ABC Moscow, you can have Victor's prison address, and of course, if you send mail to prison, it doesn't necessarily reach Victor. Actually, as far as I know, like around 1 month ago, he hadn't received any mail, so everything was just stored somewhere or trashed. But at least the prison administration knows that it's not being abandoned, that people are following the situation. And also the support campaign has to pay the lawyer bills and so on, because Victor will be, if they put this heavy pressure on him, he will be needed the constant need of lawyer support for whole time of his imprisonment, which will be the following 4 years. So there is also instructions in ABC Moscow website how to donate to the network case prisoners.
And I know that website has a lot of information about other people in the network case and also other prisoners that are being supported. Are there any individuals or cases that you'd like to mention that should be particularly or generally supported by listeners?
I think all the cases are important. Like, of course, especially the network case prisoners, because they have very long sentences. A number of them have more than 10 years. Prison sentences, but also many other cases. Like network case was at least lucky that it managed to get good international support and attention of many anarchists and anti-fascists, but there are obviously many other cases. Other cases, for example, there were two anarchist couple from Chelyabinsk who just got crazy 2-year sentences for a simple banner drop, which was done in solidarity for the network case. Also, there is artist Pavel Kurishevich, who is basically artist, not part of the anarchist movement, but he was doing many actions to support the network case. And for one of his performances, he is now in this famous Butyrka prison in Moscow, where many anarchists were jailed even before the revolution. And also, very important case is the case of Miftakhov, the mathematician. Yeah, Azat Miftakhov is in Kirov region in Russia. He was set also a support action for the network case prisoners. He was sent to 6 years in prison for just breaking a window of the ruling party official, and he's been put pretty heavy hard labor conditions, but at least he is able to receive mail. So it's important to support him by letters at this point. And also there is international campaign to have International Society of Mathematicians involved. So if any of the listeners is working or enrolled in mathematics departments in any of the universities, you can check in our website how to join the efforts to have International Association of Mathematicians to support Miftakhov, because in Russia the support campaign is actually mostly organized not by anarchists but by the community of mathematicians, because that's Miftakhov's profession.
Dmitry also mentioned in the prior interview dropping banners and posting solidarity images as something that embarrasses Putin's administration and has a deep impact. Are there other methods that come to mind, folks, like you've mentioned with the Mathematician Society and supporting them and applying pressure, but are there other methods that come to mind that folks can engage with from abroad to show solidarity with anti-fascists and anarchists as well as oppressed identities in Russia, particularly while not whitewashing the repression and cruelty of our own governments that are repressive institutions?
Yeah, I think very important thing is just to spread information and also many of the campaign, especially before the sentences, they need many of them need the lawyer bills, which can be quite expensive because there is not really much activist lawyers in Russia. Occasionally, if especially if there is no terrorist charges, you can have some human rights organizations to sponsor lawyers, but this is not always the case. If there is some radical politics involved, that doesn't necessarily happen. And but I would say also that basically maintaining horizontal contacts. Like I think it's very important to be involved in the local struggles, but I think anarchist movement is not only about the local struggles, it's also about the international solidarity, and in Russia and even more so in the Belarus. The movement is now living in some pretty difficult times, so it's good to just maintain contacts, also discussion not only anti-repression work, but general kind of strategies and perspectives and this kind of stuff. So especially when this COVID era is beginning to end, it's more important than ever also to have international meetings and discussions and not only meet in some discussion forums or social media or Twitter or whatever, but also to have face-to-face meetings and to create more solidarity.
Awesome. Well, is there anything else that you'd like to mention that I didn't ask about?
Yeah, maybe this was pretty much what I wanted to say on this. But you can the Autonom website is hosting the Anarchist Black Cross of Moscow news, so there's English section, but we can put all the relevant links and so on to this episode information, so you can check that for more information.
Does it make sense to mention the podcast project that you work on, since it does bring a lot of opportunities for international understanding of situations?
Well, yeah, I could mention. So I have also my own podcast, but it's mostly in Finnish and mostly dealing with some kind of local discussions and bits. But I will also put a Russian episode, and occasionally there will be also English text. I hope to have, for example, episode in this week, so next week, about a project called, it's like Femdacha, or it's kind of feminist shelter for burnout activists that was organized by feminist activists in the Moscow region. So this was like example of creative and positive project in Russia, because it's not only suffering and repressions, but people also have some new and interesting concepts and ideas. So I would also like people to pay attention to these kind of things. But you can find my podcast with my own name, Antii Rautiainen, which is a bit tricky for English speaker. I didn't figure out any fancy name, and also want to keep my content eclectic. I don't have any special topic, so it's just basically for my own rants about various stuff. But we can link it also to the episode description so people can find it. I have a couple of English episodes, and in the future there will be more. This one about feminist cottage or Femdacha, it will also be in English.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for having this conversation, Antii. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thanks. I hope that this is my favorite podcast. It's because others in the States don't seem to have so much international perspective. So I think it's very important that you are pushing this direction, because America is so big that people often tend to watch mostly inside.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really easy for us to to just think about ourselves as the world, sort of. But well, thanks so much for the kind words, and take care of yourself.
Yeah. Okay. See you. I guess in 5 years we will have a third.
Well, hopefully, anarchy will reign by then. So
Yeah. Okay.
It'll be a less depressing conversation.
Yeah.
And now some words from anarchist prisoner Sean Swain.
What you say, what you say, what you say, what? We'll call like a
I'm pissed. Coffee prices are about to go up, and there might even be a coffee shortage because Joe Biden can't figure out how to unload those fucking boats floating off the coast of California. We don't need some doddering septuagenarian in charge. We need somebody who knows how to run a goddamn forklift. I mean, I'm okay with civilization unraveling and global disorder imploding and all of the chaos and upheaval that will accompany that. I really am. But I had fully expected to be properly caffeinated while witnessing the collapse of capitalism. Now, with my next cup of coffee anchored in the Pacific, I'm feeling more than just a little anxiety. Hey, Sleepy Joe, don't fuck with my coffee. Yeah. With the events of the past week, it appears that our world will soon be about as orderly and organized as three monkeys attempting to have intercourse with a rolling football. We're talking about fur and teeth, scratching and snarling, DNA and pigskin flying in every direction, and that's just what's going on the floor of Congress. Things are about to get hectic. We're talking about epic catastrophe, a 21st century breakdown, what might just be the beginning of the world. First, you've got the supply and distribution chains so bottlenecked that prices are soaring. Contributing to that is the lack of truck drivers and the absence of anyone willing to become truck drivers. So stuff sits on the docks while shelves are empty. Next, you've got Biden's $70 gazillion Build Back bungle stalled in Congress because of Democratic infighting. A few holdouts holding up the passage of the massive infrastructure bill. At its inception, the bill included funding for roads, bridges, internet coverage, green technology, schools, prescription drugs, free community college for all, pre-K, and family leave for childbirth. After internal squabbling in Biden's own party, the price tag on that package has been whittled down to a fraction of its original cost, and it now only promises the filling of 5 potholes on one highway and distribution of machetes to every American household, so we can catch and kill our own food once the whole system collapses. Everything else has been yanked out of the bill. And still, it's going to be hard to pass. Even harder now since the off-year election in Virginia, where a Republican beat out a Democrat for governor. A sign of a disturbing pendulum swing to the right. This could get congressional Democrats a bit skittish, especially in those swing districts. And they may distance themselves further from the Build Back bungle and the Biden agenda. In practical terms, this could mean that our world is going to soon be defined by empty shelves, soaring prices, and collapsing roads, bridges, and schools, with no help in sight, and a Republican resurgence waiting in the wings, with Donald Trump chopping at the bit, handing out jackboots and armbands. Then, of course, there was the summit attended by all the nations and member states of the Paris Climate Accords, where world leaders burned thousands of gallons of fossil fuel in private jets to attend. There was a lot of hand-wringing and posing, and a few games of naked twister, where world leaders like Biden tried out organic baby oil and strawberry colonics. At the end of this pivotal summit, world leaders burned thousands more gallons of fossil fuels in their private jets to get home. More of the permafrost melted, releasing tons of new methane into the atmosphere, and we're all going to fucking die. Yeah, we're all going to fucking die. So, that's what's happened this week. Can't wait to see what happens next week. Perhaps armies of demons will materialize and attempt to feast upon our genitals. Won't that be fun? Really, though, when you look at what's confronting us, it's really scary. We're actually facing a situation where there's a race, and all life hangs in the balance. It's between, on one hand, what is now the inevitable collapse of civilization, our social, political, and economic institutions that probably can't be salvaged by now, and, on the other hand, the quickly deteriorating health of our planet. We're in a scenario where we have to hope that global and national systems go into a death spiral before the ecosystem does. We actually have to root against the larger systems of power, production, and distribution, hoping they sputter out first and provide our planet time-space to heal. That means we have to hope for the implosion of the very complexes that provide us toilet paper and beer, schools and prisons, and coffee. It's not a question of whether we're going to have prosperity and creature comforts in the future. It's a question of whether we're even going to have a future in the future. So, in upcoming segments, I hope to share some ideas on what we can do to exercise personal and collective power in this pivotal time when things might seem so daunting, so hopeless, so uncaffeinated. For what it's worth, I don't personally believe the situation to be hopeless. I believe that what happens next depends on what all of us do now. Everything counts. This is anarchist prisoner Sean Swain, back at the super duper uber mega ultra turbo hyper multi maxi max in Youngstown, Ohio. If you're listening, you are the resistance.
You can write to Sean Swain at his new old new again address at Sean Swain, number A243205, OSP Youngstown, 878 Coatesville Hubbard Road, Youngstown, Ohio 44505. If you'd like to see some of his writings, check out easy ways to get a hold of his books, or make donations to his legal support, you can visit seanswain.org. If you appreciate the work that we do here at The Final Straw, please consider becoming a regular sustainer through our Patreon or purchasing some merch. You can find more information about that or sending us a cash donation. You can find more info about that at our website by clicking the donate/merch button. If you want to support us and don't have any money, that's perfectly fine. We appreciate feedback. We appreciate show ideas. We appreciate when people share our show with other people, whether that be through the many social media platforms that we inhabit, or better, person to person with other comrades. Listen to the show with someone else. Have a discussion group around it. Do some solidarity actions. It's cool. If you like the idea of us broadcasting on a radio station in your area, maybe you missed that last week we started broadcasting on a station in Petaluma for the first time in Northern California. You can check out our radio broadcasting link on our website for more information on that. The funding that we collect, for the most part, goes to cover the production of transcripts of each episode, so as to be more available for folks for whom hearing is a difficulty or hearing in English is not a preferred way to learn. Once it's transcribed, it's easily translated, it's easily printed off due to the lovely zines that friends are producing with our transcripts. You can send them off to prison, you can leave them on a bus seat, you can leave them at a laundromat, you can stick it under your landlord's door. There's all sorts of things you can do. It's wonderful. Check out those transcripts, check out the zines. Sharing is caring. If you want to get in touch with us, there's plenty of ways up on the site. Follow us on social media, rate us on the podcasting apps, all that lovely stuff. Rant over. And thanks for supporting the project however you do. It means the world to us and keeps us going. This is The Final Straw, and I'm Bursa Goodness. This show will later be archived at thefinalstrawradio.noblogs.org, and you can email us with questions and suggestions at thefinalstrawradio@riseup.net or thefinalstrawradio@protonmail.com. If you'd like to use any episode for your project or radio show, feel free to do so. Just send us an email to let us know. If you care to, you can send us letters at The Final Straw Radio, P.O. Box 6004, Asheville, North Carolina, 28816. This show is brought to you by Firestorm Books and Coffee. Located at 610 Haywood Road, Firestorm Books and Coffee is a worker-owned co-op in Asheville, specializing in offbeat, underground, and independent literature. You can find a catalog of Firestorm's books and zines, plus a full calendar of events up at their website, firestorm.coop.